Welcome back to Psychology Applied to Work. This is lecture 27, Becoming More Motivated. All right, recall from lecture 26, we finished up chapter 9 in the book, and we talked about engagement. We talked about what engagement is, and we talked about job satisfaction, specifically ways of measuring it. Talked about the impact of losing one's job. Talked about the relationship between job satisfaction and behavior. Talked about satisfaction and compensation. We talked about this thing called job involvement, another thing called organizational commitment, and also organizational citizenship. All right, today is a bonus lecture, and we are going to explore how to become more motivated. And the slide topics are pretty simple. It's know yourself, negotiate with yourself, hack yourself, and transform yourself. All right, let's start with know yourself. So this is motivation. This is the know yourself slide. So what motivates you? And what motivates you naturally? So naturally is kind of means intrinsically, the things that you really don't have to associate with a larger goal to be motivated for. Sometimes it is the larger goal that is the natural motivation. It's just you struggle with the motivations for how the hell to get there. But you really start thinking about when you're in a motivated state and what is it that you feel like you're driving yourself towards, and what are those motivational states that feel like they're sort of their own control, they sort of emerge within you, versus ones that you maybe had to contrive a situation. Anyway, be mindful of that, and then start asking yourself, okay, I recognize I'm in a motivated state. It's driving me to action. Does it feel like it's approach or avoidant? Which is to say, does this feel like I'm positively moving forward in a dopaminergic? It's sort of rewarding to move forward. It's a little pleasurable. That's not the same as like a purely pleasurable thing. It's more of a you're in that positive affective state of seeking. So that would be the approach motivation. That would be a dopamine-based circuits. Or do you feel you're more of an avoidant motivation, which is, what is it that spurs you? Does the thought of, boy, I want to get this done, or boy, doing this, whatever this activity is that you find yourself motivated in, does it feel like you just want to do it? Or do you feel more like and you'll notice yourself thinking about these things if you pay attention. Do you find yourself thinking, what happens if I don't do it? And then do you find yourself thinking that would be a negative thing? If I don't listen to this lecture and put in these damn extra credit points, I'm not going to get the grade I want. How much of what's driving you is avoiding a bad outcome, and feeling like if I don't do this, something negative will happen. And both motivations, approach-based motivation and avoidance-based motivation, are equally good, and we have very, very old and very fundamental brain circuits, so to speak, or deep mechanisms that are both approach and mechanisms that are avoidant. So one isn't better than the other. They're both very powerful motivators, and they're associated with different things, but they can also be active at the same time. You can be really motivated to want to do something, and at the same time be concerned if you don't get it done, in which case you can be maximally approach and maximally avoidant, and that's the stuff that is you're just super driven to get it done. But anyways, be thinking about things when you find yourself doing something, and keep in mind, if you're like just sitting down and playing a video game or whatever, you might be doing an avoidance motivation, which is to say you'd rather sort of disappear into some hedonic pleasure, sort of lose yourself into something, and that includes things like drugs, alcohol, and sex, and what have you. But it's also things like video games or other forms of self-entertainment. You might be doing that because you don't like you don't like the big long list of stuff that you know you need to get done, and you don't want to be reminded of them, and so you're actually in a kind of avoidant motivation to not deal with the things that you haven't resolved in your life. To some extent, when you're like, I just like to play video games, well, okay, do you? Because of the intrinsic value of it, and I'm not disputing that that isn't a factor, but how much of a factor might be some avoidant behavior that you know that these things are hanging out, that you haven't hanging over you, and you haven't resolved them, and they relate to your future. But when you're playing video games or when you're drinking or whatever, those things are no longer top of mind, and so they don't cause you stress or anxiety. Well, okay, some of that is avoidance motivation. Anyway, things to think about here. Recognize your own motivated state. Try to tap into what you think is driving it, and keep in mind the dimensionality, that it can be approach, it can be avoidant, it can be both. So what's the context in which you feel these motivations? Are there some goals? A goal could be, I don't want to deal with my life, and so that's why I'm drinking, okay? And a goal could be, I really want to succeed, and that's why I'm listening intently to this autistic engineer teaching this class prattle on with word salad. Anyway, some things to think about. I could probably spend a whole hour and feel like we're really just scratching the surface here. But do make this a thing that you're paying attention to get to know yourself and get to know your own motivated states, and figure out when you're in them, when you're out, what their nature is, because what you're then trying to do is lining up things in your life that work well with what motivates you naturally, and you're going to try to figure out some hacks to try to get you in a motivated state. You're going to learn to negotiate with yourself to try to maximize your motivated states. Anyway, some things to think about. And also, do you know your personality? This is the big five, but this is really broader than that. This is like all the individual differences that relate to your behaviors. How do you behave that's really different than others in a way that's not specific to skills or necessarily just an experiential thing. Obviously, learn the big five. I would encourage you to go down to the big five aspect, the big five aspect scale, which breaks each of the big five into 2 extra dimensions, which we talked about in the individual difference lecture, and take a personality assessment on your own, and think about those things, and ask yourself, what are the wherever you are in, say, agreeableness, but recognize the situational variation in agreeableness, recognize the situational variation in your extroversion or introversion, and ask yourself, how does this relate to my motivation? If I'm really introverted, for instance, does that get in the way of my ability to make opportunities, to make myself available to opportunities? Does my introversion keep me from approaching people that might be part of some activity I want to do that's related to some goal? Is some aspects of my personality helping or hurting my motivation? And to what extent does your personality then vary by situation, and can you manipulate those situations? That's kind of gets into that. Can you hack yourself a little bit? What are the ways in which you can get yourself to be just extroverted enough, for instance? What are the ways you can contrive social interactions that maybe you would be socially anxious about, like just asserting yourself? And what are more indirect, or what are ways you can structure meetings with people so that you can make the connections you need that are associated with your goals? And anyway, some stuff to think about. Also, what's your default locus of control? Well, what does that mean? So if you're not trying to change your mindset, if you're not trying to change your approach, what is your normal or default or typical sense of the causes of your situation in life? To what extent are you the agent in your own life? Or to what extent do you feel like external forces are the reason why you have whatever advantage or disadvantage that you have? And bear in mind that the more you attribute the things in your life to external forces, the less sense of agency that you possess in your life, the less likely you will be to actually take action. And the more you convince yourself and feel and think that you are the agent in your life, you are the one that causes your outcomes. That will both enable and embolden you to take action, and it will also assign accountability and responsibility, blame, for inaction and for failures and that sort of thing, and that will help bring the focus in your thinking to you and your actions. Now that doesn't mean that isn't a gross dimensional reduction. It is. So there are lots of causes for why you are where you are and what you have for advantage or disadvantage. If you go and do something, there's a multitude of causes as to why you do that, and many of the things have reciprocality, and we don't need to get into that. I've talked about that multiple times in the past. The point here is not. This is sort of a time in which having too much conscious attention to the complexity of things, too much awareness of how things have multiple dimensions and multiple causes can actually get in your way. Here, it's actually generally beneficial for you to view yourself as the predominant actor, in your life, as yourself as the predominant, cause of things, as it relates to thinking about the future, so that you feel the burden of action, that you need to do this, no one else is going to do this, things aren't going to push you along. Be careful about this kind of reductive thinking in terms of assigning yourself blame for why bad things happen to you. It's sometimes more beneficial to recognize the complexity of things. Yes, a bad thing happened to me. Yes, it was a failure. Yes, I was involved in decisions that resulted in that failure, but there were lots of other factors to that. I'm going to learn from that. I'm going to assign a certain amount of reduction of the causes, to me and my actions, only to the point where I can learn, but not so much that I'm going to ruminate on it and have it cut into my confidence and make me spiral into depression or anxiety or whatever. But when you're forward thinking, there it's often beneficial to try to not think about all the other causes in the world for what can give you an advantage or disadvantage, or what can spur you to action, and to think more and more about yourself as an agent, and that you have to take that action. So there's your dreams, there's reality, the thing in between, okay? The distance in between, all the stuff in between, that's action. Yes, other things happen. Yes, things can come and push your way. Your dreams can come towards you. You can win the frickin' lottery. But don't think that way. Because if you do think too much that way, you won't act, and that will dramatically lower the possibility of making your goals or your dreams of actually happening. You don't get to your goal, you don't achieve your dream, you don't get to your future vision of yourself and your life in the future without action. And so to take that action, you have to be the agent in your own life. In order to do that, you need to really focus on you as the causal agent in your life, and try to defocus on all the other causal agents in your life, because you can't control them, but you can control what your actions are. All right. Do you know your affinities? What the hell are affinities? Do you know this? What are you into? What do you like? What are the? If you look at all the things that you sort of naturally found yourself interested in, are there common themes about them? Have they shifted over time? And if you were really into something when you were, say, 10, and you were not into it at all when you were 13, how come? But is there a higher level of abstraction you could look at it to say, well, really, they're both the same thing? I liked Minecraft, and now I play a different game, but what I do like is the gaming environment where you can, and when I think about the games I'm into now, they're kind of like Minecraft in that I can build stuff in the game, or I have more control in the game, or whatever. But you can kind of look across your interests and try to figure out which ones are definitely different and which ones have some commonality. But then think about when you like found yourself really interested in something that for whatever reason you weren't into it before. I didn't used to like chemistry. I didn't used to like material science, and I went through undergrad, thinking chemistry is just this terribly boring thing. And I will grant you the way chemistry is taught, especially the introduction of chemistry, kind of ensures that most people find it boring. But then I found myself in a job that involved a factory that had a lot of material science happening, that had a lot of chemical processing happening, that had a lot of plastics and composites and things. And I found myself just super fascinated by chemistry. Well, it turned out that I had now a way to contextualize the subject. So it turned out it wasn't that I wasn't interested in chemistry, it was just more that I'm really interested in how things work. And once I had something that was a context, once I had a goal, which is I want to know how this stuff is happening in this factory, I suddenly was interested in all the things associated with it, and I was suddenly very interested in chemistry. So affinities are weird, and kind of tap into, in that example I gave is I'm ridiculously curious about how stuff works, and so in the working backwards of how stuff works, I can find interests in all sorts of subjects. But if I just look at those subjects without that context, you just pick a subject, I don't find it typically at all interesting until I connect it to, if I understand this subject, it will actually then tell me how this thing works that I am super interested in. So this helps trying to figure out what goals you should line yourself up with. What jobs you should pursue, what niche you might want to try to find within your job. Get to know what it is you're interested in, and really tune into why those interests shift. And then try to find the common themes across that. Because once you find the common themes, you can be a little bit more in the driver's seat and a little less like you're chasing your muse everywhere. So like, I know I'm super curious about how stuff works. So if I want to learn some weird subject, because there's a reason I need to know this or whatever, I try to connect it to something in my life that I am curious about in terms of how it works. So for this class, in order to teach this class, the majority of the material I'm teaching you, I already had a deep background in, but there was some elements in there that I hadn't been exposed myself to until I committed to teaching this class. But because it was connected to things I was interested in, I was able to have a keen interest in that subject matter. So you might find things in these lectures boring, and you might find other things interesting. That's a clue for what your affinities are. Anyway, seems like a lot of talking around what do you like, when you might think you just like things. I like these things, I don't like things. But the world's complicated, and often the reason you like those things might be because you have some positive associations with it, but it also might be because you actually find that related to some larger thing that you're trying to do, some larger goal you're trying to achieve, or whatever. But anyway, tune into these things and develop a sophisticated understanding of your own affinities. And then, do you know your competencies? Are you honest about them? What are you competent in? What are your skills? What is your knowledge? What tasks are you good at performing? what like complex interpersonal situations are you good at navigating? I mean, there's lots of ways you can look at competencies. Are you really decisive? And in what circumstances? And then how do you measure them in some way? How can you make sure that you're as objective as you can be, so that you don't convince yourself you're really good at something that you're not, or what seems to be just as often the case, where you sell yourself short, where you're actually reasonably good at something, and you just don't think you are, because it just seems so complex or so hard. But so yeah, get to know what you're good at, and especially because part of the things that you're going to struggle with motivating yourself about is to get better at competencies. But if you can line up your competencies, something you're chasing, that a skill you're trying to gain, is there some way to abstract that out so it's a little bit more aligned with your affinities? And if you then recognize that you're completely in control of your life, you can combine some of these bullets here, where your locus of control is appropriately set to where you feel the responsibility, to where you're attaching this to something you're inherently interested in, and so you then find some more motivation to learn a particular skill. Another thing, and some of this relates to how to leverage avoidance motivation, which is, how do you make commitments in your life? Do you? And do they? How meaningful are they to you? And I would suggest to you that if you're going to make a commitment, to truly make a commitment, and if you don't follow through with your commitments, you're not really making commitments. Okay, you're just making false promises. It's not a commitment, whether that's to yourself or to others. If you just routinely don't actually achieve them, and don't meet your commitments, were they really commitments? Or do you just like telling yourself a story, but you tell yourself a story, yeah, I'll get that done, or you tell a friend, yeah, I'll do that for you, or you tell a coworker, yes, I'll get that task done, and then you don't do it, and then you come up with all these excuses. The dog ate my homework, my car broke down, my phone did this, I ended up having all these other things I needed to do. Okay, where is your locus of control there, when you're pointing to all these external causes while you didn't make your commitment? Now, things can really happen that physically make it impossible for you to meet a commitment within a time frame, but often, and perhaps most often, when someone fails to make a commitment, it's because they actually didn't make the full commitment to themselves. They didn't really recognize that they had the agency here. They looked at it as, well, maybe I'll get that done. I'll try to get that done, but some other stuff will get in the way, and oh well, it's not my fault. Well, people who get their shit done, people who make their commitments, they typically develop a really good reputation. They typically accomplish a lot in life, and they usually have a pretty good locus of control centered around themselves. And they are agents in their life. They take it personally. If they fail to make a commitment, that is a big negative thing. So they have a lot of avoidance motivation around failure to make a commitment. And so be thinking about that. And when you can make a commitment to yourself or to others, are you lying? Are you lying to yourself? Are you effectively lying to others? And if you readily will go to some external reason why you didn't get it done, then you do not have the appropriate level of agency in your own life, and that will hurt you. That will hamstring you. That will slow you in your life. But if you take that commitment very seriously, and accept that you are the agent in your life, and that there are always external causes, but that's just shit you got to deal with, barriers you got to knock down or go around or whatever, but you've still got to get it done, you'll find your behavior has changed immensely. And a lot of that is avoidance motivation of sort of fear of failing to make a commitment, and that's okay. That's good. If you can find approach motivation in that too, which is you really feel a sense of deep accomplishment and satisfaction in making your commitments, You know, if you can get a dopaminergic circuit associated with your commitments, that's awesome too. And look for ways you can get approach and avoidance lined up. Keep in mind that if you're trying to get avoidance motivation, you want to basically get whatever it is you're avoiding. You want to be successful in avoiding it, because otherwise you'll actually be creating a lot of anxiety and stress for yourself, and then that worry. There are people who have very strong avoidance motivation, and yet they're almost never really stressed because they are motivated, because they are taking action and they are confident that by taking that action they're going to avoid the thing. I mean, you can live in an environment that's full of dangers. You can live by a cliff. Every day if you're driving a car, you're going very fast, and there's another car going also very fast, heading right towards you, except for the axis. The axis is just slightly off. They're in the other lane, and they're moving parallel to you, and they're literally just a few feet from a head-on collision. And yet somehow, day after day after day, almost all the time, with the exception of some tragic moments, you avoid that. And you probably aren't gripped in fear because you have developed a confidence in your ability to keep on your side of the road, and a certainty that the other person is going to pretty well stay on that other side of the road. And so you probably aren't anxiety ridden every time you drive, because you have figured out how to be motivated to avoid an accident in a way that you're confident about it. So avoidance motivation doesn't mean that you have to be all fretted with worry. It means it is motivating you to take an action in order to avoid something. So hopefully that little nuance helps you understand this isn't about just fear and anxiety. This is about whatever motivates you to act. And with commitments, look for ways in which you can leverage avoidance motivation and use approach motivation. See a failure of a commitment as a personal failure, as a personal hit to your reputation, and work very hard in the future to avoid it. And be very careful about making commitments, and take them extraordinarily seriously when you do, and you'll find that you're much more successful in life. All right, and then do you have a plan? What are your goals, and do you have a plan of action towards those goals? How well have you articulated your goals, and at what time frame? And if you don't have articulated goals, you actually don't know where to go. And then your goals become short term. Your goals become how to entertain yourself, and then you're not going anywhere in your life, and that makes you feel bad. So then you get extra goals, avoidance motivation around how to not think about that your life isn't going anywhere. But if you have real goals and you make commitments to achieve those goals that are very future oriented, and they're mapped to plans that tell you what you're supposed to do right now, then you're in a proper state of being, and you're a proper motivated state. And then all of this slide around getting to know yourself. For some people, this is really good advice, and for a few of you, you're already way too obsessed with yourself. You already worry way too much. You already metacognate about why you are doing something. Who am I really? You might be obsessed with your personality. You might be obsessed with your identity. You might be obsessed with your successes and failures. You might ruminate on your anxieties or your fears. For those people, be careful about ruminating too much. And for those of you who my words might be ringing true, watch your focus and think outside. When you're thinking about goals, don't ruminate about whether you will or will not achieve it. Just lay down the path external to yourself and focus outward. Focus on the allocentric rather than the egocentric. You can look those words up if you want. Focus on the world that you are taking action in, and not on the introspective states that you're in, if you happen to be someone prone to that kind of rumination. If you feel confident, you're not prone to, wallowing in your self-pity or spiraling into downward depressions or wasting endless time just, asking yourself questions that you can't seem to answer. If that's not you, then definitely spend some time to tune in deeply to yourself and to learn to know the subtleties, and then to use that knowledge to help negotiate with yourself, to help sort of develop some hacks, and learn to become more motivated. Okay, a lot of stuff here. A lot of tangents we did go on, and a lot more I skipped, because this whole topic is a huge topic. All right, so now that hopefully you're developing a sense for yourself, what do you do about that? Well, you can start negotiating with yourself. You start learning, what is the value of your own time? To what extent? And again, this is a lecture around how to become more motivated. If you're already super motivated, this isn't for you. Move along. But when you find yourself, you want to be motivated in a certain area, and you just can't seem to be, and you have a pretty sophisticated understanding of who you are. Well, start having conversations with yourself at some level. They literally could be forced conversations, or sort of metaphoric inferred. But negotiate with yourself. Figure out what it is you're willing to do. What is your time worth, and how do you sell that? How do you sell that effort? The willingness to spend some time on something. Do you have your long-term goals established? Do you have actually, and sometimes the negotiation just comes down to, okay, I know I want to graduate, and I'd like to graduate with good grades, and I'd like to graduate, within a certain time frame, and I know I have to take this class in order to graduate, but boy, I just don't want to do the work. Okay, well, I don't want to sit through this damn lecture where this guy just rattles on. Okay, but what am I willing to do? Can I listen at 2x and do something else and sort of half listen? Can I just, how about 5 minutes? Can I do 5 minutes? So this is like a negotiation with yourself. What is the shortest thing that's still part of the plan that you are willing to do? And if you can't if you can't get to that point where where you're willing to do at least one small thing, well, then your long-term goal isn't necessarily legitimate, or it's not legitimately mapped to that thing. You have not properly committed to that goal. It isn't attached to your identity enough. It isn't real to you enough to spur you into action of even a tiny thing. And so, in which case, work on the long-term goal and work on the medium-term goals that are connected to it. Make them vivid, make them real, make them something you desperately want to achieve. And then with that in mind, map yourself back to the thing you're trying to do right now, and see what you can do to negotiate, some small piece of action. Can you make your sub goals? And the sub goal could literally be all the way down to, am I willing to spend 5 minutes? Find what is that level of sub goal. What is the breaking down of the steps? How far do you have to go before you find success in negotiation with yourself? So keep doing that until you find what you are willing to do. You don't have to commit to listening to me talk for an hour. If you just feel like that is not at all what you want to do, okay. These are on YouTube. You can pause it and keep the tab open and come back. You could just use the PDF slides. And are you willing to watch 5 minutes? Are you willing to watch 10 minutes? Are you willing to watch 10 minutes of content at 2x so you get that only lasts 5 minutes? Are you willing to read one slide in the PDF? What is that smallest thing you are willing to do? How much effort are you willing to put in? This is a negotiation. Think vector, and which is to say the direction, which is to say something that's moving you towards the goal. Think I am now vectoring. I am heading towards the goal. Think of that, not the magnitude, not the distance. So, am I willing to do a page? Am I willing to do a minute? Am I willing to do 5 minutes? Okay, do that minute. Do that 5 minutes. Wow, you're moving towards your goal. Okay. Okay, yes, I moved towards my goal. Do I need to take a break? Is that all I'm willing to do? Or can I do another minute? Can I do another 5 minutes? So you find that thing that gets you to move. The point is that you act. What is the minimum needed to act? And, and don't sit and think, I need to watch the lecture. I need to watch the lecture while you're watching Netflix, or you're hanging with friends, or doing God knows what on TikTok. TikTok's evil, man. Talk about something trained for dopamine. YouTube Shorts and TikTok, man, you get started on those. If you're negotiating with yourself while trying to pull away from TikTok, keep in mind you're locked in a dopaminergic circle of death, and you need to stop. Okay. Think that just the directional progress, regardless of how small. All right. So if you're failing at self motivation, this is sort of a restatement with a little bit of added here. Reduce that size of whatever that hard task is, the tedious task is to that you're putting off. Reduce it to the level you're willing to act, and then if need be, in the negotiation, say, okay, am I willing to do 5 minutes? I don't know. Well, am I willing to do 5 minutes if it lets me do 10 minutes, and then let myself do 10 minutes of this TikTok crap? Okay, let's do this for 5 minutes, and then we'll go back to TikTok for 10 minutes or 30 minutes. And then hopefully over time, those things start reversing, that you're going to do 30 minutes of work and then give yourself 10 minutes of TikTok. But that's, there's a lot of discipline involved in actually doing that. Be careful on one thing though, which is if the thing that you're trying to do is something that you kind of find intrinsically rewarding, if you're one of those people that enjoys these bonus lectures, and based upon the extra credit, I know some of you really do enjoy these lectures, that you really like psychology, you really like ideas, or you really for whatever reason enjoy my perspective on it. I understand that's not everybody, and that's cool. But if you are like that, using this as an example, be careful about turning that into a thing you reward. If there's something like intrinsically rewarding, it doesn't mean it's like eating ice cream. But if it's like, okay, yeah, there's some inherent value in that, you want to be a little bit careful before you attach that to some external reward. Like, if you enjoy watching psychology lectures, but they're a little bit hard, but you're kind of into it. But it isn't. But it is still something you gotta, make yourself do. But when you're doing it, it's kind of okay. Be careful about negotiating with yourself in terms of a reward. I'll watch this psychology lecture and then I'm gonna TikTok for an hour. Please don't do that. But you're gonna do you're gonna do whatever the hell you want. I know that. So anyway, if it's something that's already intrinsically rewarding, and then you throw in an extra, extrinsic reward on top of that, you can actually change your dopaminergic connections, your circuits a little bit, and you can actually find that you're less motivated to actually do it when you don't have the reward. So think of the reward, I'm going to allow myself to do X, for things that you definitely know you don't find at all intrinsically rewarding, and be a little bit more careful. And if you do find it kind of intrinsically rewarding, then maybe don't add the reward part. Just negotiate down to what's the part where you're willing to move forward, and then do something else, but don't associate it with a reward. Anyway, hopefully you caught the subtlety there. Okay, so we talked about knowing yourself. We talked about we talked about knowing yourself. We talked about negotiating with yourself. Now hack yourself. Okay, this hack is definitely not a meat cleaver. This hack is a computer hack. This is how to leverage a situation and a mechanism in order to make something functional that might not have actually been part of the original intent. Think identity over outcomes is one hack, and that's from this book here, Atomic Habits. It's not the only place, but this book's pretty good distillation of some good hacks. and just calling it a hack doesn't that shouldn't take it away at all. Life is full of exaptations. That's a word you can look up, which is like when evolution evolved some adaptation, but the environment shifted. But it actually turned out something that was evolved for one type of an environment actually turned out to be really, really useful, really, really adaptive in a different way in a different environment. The term for that can be exaptation. Anyway, identity over outcomes. That is to say, instead of going, I am going to graduate from college, I am going to get a good job, I'm going to get a good salary, the shift the mind a little bit more to I am a kind of person. I'm a graduating kind of person. I'm a get a good job kind of person. I am that person. That's different. The identity is part of your self-narrative. It's often tied to in-group associations, and when you have the identification, especially an in-group identification that comes with its own kind of motivation to follow the norms. Right? Remember that in-groups make norms and in-groups enforce norms. We've got these wonderful circuits that if we associate ourselves with an in-group, if this is our tribe, this is our village, this is our family, this is our clan, this is whatever, and those have norms in them, these are the way we behave. That could be, even weird taboo stuff like we don't eat this type of thing. If you want to talk about religious identities and older, strong cultural things associated with food, but really just norms. We have. And there's a reason why this is under hack. We already have these pre-built circuits where we tend to just want to follow the norms, and it creates just super weird behaviors. I mean, we had political polarization associated with vaccinations, where it's still underway, where people that were following Trump. Or maybe on the right side of the political spectrum are more likely to be sort of skeptical, are more likely to be looking at sort of the risks associated with it, more likely to call into question the effectiveness. And those that are with Biden or that generally coming on the left, are more likely, not universally or anything, but they're more likely to be pro-vax and to be talking about the benefits way outweigh the risks, and to be pushing the normative behavior that people should be getting vaccinated and be more performative in showing that they are. All right, so I'm not having a discussion about the pros and cons or taking any side here, but I want to point something out here. The vaccine got rolled out right after the election, but the vaccines were being developed during the end of the Trump administration, but the vaccines rolled out under the Biden administration, and we ended up with political polarization associated with the vaccine. Well, it's hard to remember, but there was a little bit of political polarization around the vaccines that were inverted. The Democrats were calling into question whether the vaccines were being developed too fast. Before the election, and the Trump administration was pushing the vaccines, and then the election happened, and Biden won and Trump lost, and the vaccines were rolled out, and all of a sudden it shifted, and then it shifted and scaled up. So the thought experiment I have for you is, what if the results had been different? What if Trump had won and Biden lost? Would the political polarization associated with vaccines be reversed right now? It might not be easy for you to believe, but I would assert to you that there is a good chance that had the election go the other way, the folks on the right, the folks supportive of Trump would be pro-vaccine, and the folks that were supportive of Biden would be by and large, less pro-vaccine and more likely to be talking about risks and side effects and whether kids need to take it, and just completely reversed. And I know that might run in against narratives about, who likes science and all that crap. And I would just tell you that the norms associated with your in-groups are extraordinarily powerful things. And the humans, our ability as humans to spin up a construal, to whip up a narrative, to justify something that's part of our the norms of our in-group, that's part of the binding narrative of our in-group, is ridiculously powerful. And recall I've said in previous lectures that typically speaking in a society, the absolute smartest people spend all of their super intelligence basically defending the binding narrative, by basically explaining more complexity around why the world is just the way it is. We create. You see these ideas of somebody going back in time, and they have all the knowledge of the future, and so then they're in the past. Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court is an example, but it's been around many times, that you have all this future knowledge and then you can apply it to the past and basically take the wool off of everybody's eyes and show them the real truth. Okay, fine. But there's this sort of a follow-on concept of, if you're just smart enough, you could see through the lies of your society and you see the truth. And that's just not true. The kinds of people that are likely to be renegades within a culture doesn't correlate with intelligence. I mean, sometimes it lines up, but just because you're really intelligent doesn't mean that you will see through the lies of your society. Your binding narrative is what's holding you together. You're extraordinarily motivated to find ways in which things will fit the binding narrative. And if you've got a set of norms, you're extraordinarily motivated to follow them. And when you're in like weird situations where it's kind of hard to figure out how to follow the norms, being really smart helps you like lawyer out, figure out how to find a more complex description that says why these norms ought to be followed. And it's only when you just completely fail to do that that you sometimes will re-examine whether the norm should be tweaked. Okay, so we're talking about hacking yourself, and we're talking about how to use in-group norms to make you more motivated. This is about identity. So if you want to be successful, you identify as a successful person. Doesn't mean you don't still make a plan. It doesn't mean you still don't you go through the steps and think, okay, I have to do this and I have to do that because I want to do this and because I want to be a success. But this is about motivation. This isn't about how to make a good plan. That's its own thing, and it's just as important. But if you say, I am the kind of person that is successful, I am a successful person. Now, not only does that kind of make you more motivated, because now part of the norms of a successful person is they behave a certain way. Now you might find yourself sitting up a little straighter, dressing a little nicer, getting to work on time or to class on time, to doing your homework, because that's what successful people do. And the more you fully accept that identity, the more you'll actually find motivation, and it'll also be avoidant motivation. Because successful people aren't lazy. Successful people don't look like slobs. Okay, or I am a polished person. I am a calm and confident person. I'm a resilient person. Whatever it is, this is identity language. But if you can hack that, if you can really tap into that, that can be extraordinarily powerful at giving you motivated states, both avoidant motivation and approach motivation. And a lot of it can be understood by thinking about it as your natural desire to follow the norms of your in-group. But again, you have to articulate that. You have to really feel deep down. If you say, I am a successful person, that's who I am, that's my identity, make that vivid. Who are the examples of those successful? What is your prototype successful person that you're latching on to this identity? You'll feel it if it motivates you, you'll feel it if you feel there's norms associated with it, because you think, no, I'm not going to wear those shoes because that's not the kind of shoes that a successful person wears. I'm not telling you that shoes are going to make or break anything. Yeah, but for some people, I'm not the type of person that notices shoes. My wife is. Anyway, but if you find yourself thinking those things, I'm going to be early because that's what successful people do, then it's working, okay? But you have to make the identity real. You have to make the thing you're attaching yourself to as powerful as any in group that you feel fully bonded to and bought into on the binding narrative, so that the norms, and you have to know those norms, so those norms become real to you. Okay. It's some real potent stuff. Hopefully this is making sense to you. Now, have you read Atomic Habits? So this book talks about identity. It doesn't go into it the way I did about norms and in-group and out-group. That's how I view it. That's what makes the most sense to me. I think it's accurate. Anyway, this book by James Clear is just a nice, easy to read book full of all sorts of really good things that I would kind of call hacks. And they definitely talk about identity and seeing yourself and believing yourself to be a person who has good work habits, a person who gets things done, a person who's organized, a person who's successful, and the power of that identity over outcomes. It also has some good hacks on things that to get you motivated and to develop habits. What can you do to make it obvious? What can you do to make it attractive? What can you do to make it easy? How do you make it satisfying? And we won't get into that. The book is just easily digestible book. I would recommend you read it. I would recommend you get the Audible so that you can also like play it a few different times. Just to get to know all the pieces of it and then practice it. And then how do you turn your gaps into strengths? So under what context? Did some things that are challenges to you, when do they become assets? I'm an autistic engineer. There are ways in which that can be extraordinarily aggravating to other people. There are ways in which that can get in the way of goals I'm trying to achieve. There are definitely times in which being autistic can make interpersonal interactions, especially with people I don't know very well, challenging. But where are there ways in which that can become an asset? And definitely, I've found lots of ways in my life that can be an asset. And I obviously have developed habits to keep the gaps, keep the gap or the challenge or the weakness or the difficult side of that. Develop habits to mitigate that. But where is it a strength? Where are the things in yourself? Like, are you super curious? You can't pay attention to anything because you got ADHD, but you are super curious. Okay, how can you leverage that curiosity? What are aspects of this lecture that you're trying to learn, or this chapter you're trying to read? How can you hack into that curiosity? What's a part you want to learn about? I can't tell you how your particular challenges can become strengths, and not all of them can become strengths. But sometimes they can, and so you should be thinking about that and looking for ways that you could turn that around. And then hunt for hacks that work for you. Okay, everybody's different, situations are different. YouTube's awesome. It's full of all sorts of stuff. Don't believe everything you watch. But find the stuff that feels like it's talking to you and your situation. Play with different types of productivity tricks and motivation tricks. And some will work for you and some won't. And some may work for you for a little while. Novelty has a powerful thing. You might be in a meta-motivated state that makes a certain hack work better. And then when that sort of sense of urgency is gone, or whatever that might be driving you at a higher level, that hack might not work as well. Whatever. It's a lifelong process. And think of it that way. But avail yourself to this and look for stuff that works for you. Some strange stuff here. Consider things like cold showers, or really voluntary approach to stressors. This is a potent thing. I take ice cold shower every morning. I have for almost 2 years. I used to hate the cold. I did it as a way to look at blood pressure. I'm a lot older than I maybe look, and Anecdotally here, it was something that turned out to be very beneficial for me and blood pressure, but also this notion of voluntary approach towards a stressor gives you a strong sense of personal agency. It gives you a lot of if you can walk into every morning, ice cold shower, doesn't start hot, just cold, all the way cold. I mean, this is North Dakota, especially after a long winter. You know, our tap water can get pretty cold. If you're in Texas, you know, I don't know if it's ever cold, but it's cold here, and every morning that's going to be ice cold in a few minutes, approaching that and having that whole mindset of I'm going to do this. This is going to wake me up. I mean, it sure does, but. That actually, you know, being able to do that and getting over the sort of the negative of it, and getting to where you experience the benefits of it is extraordinarily invigorating. But the other thing it does is it tells me there's lots of stuff that I might not like, but it's no big deal. I mean, it's something like a cold shower might not be the right thing for you, but you know, something where you're voluntarily moving towards something that's can be pretty stressful, and really, you know, really hard workouts. You know, having the motivation to do that. These have tangible benefits, where you know you can do something hard, and you have the confidence that this will be fine. And so look for ways in which you can help reinforce that mindset. And cold showers is just one of them. But if you're going to do anything like that, anything that involves stressors, you know, make sure you know what the hell you're doing, you know, make sure you're doing it, whatever it is, safely. All right, and then make a lifelong commitment to this. Okay, transform yourself. So this is really the end of all this stuff. You've gotten to know yourself. You've negotiated with yourself. You've developed a bunch of hacks and techniques. Okay, now put it all into practice and change who you are. So what is your identity? Make sure your identity matches your goals. You know, live your identity, let it and believe it to the point where you associate norms with it that become motivational to you. You know, so make what you want to become your identity. I mean, if you're now saying I'm a superhero, well, okay, try to be in planet Earth and all of that sort of thing. Don't set up an identity of something that you absolutely cannot achieve, or that the failure to achieve that will result in some sort of extremely traumatic thing. This is more to say I'm a successful person doesn't mean you have to. You don't have to be a billionaire to be able to say I'm a successful person. It's just where you are in your life right now. Your identity should actually motivate you. This isn't about in 20 years I'm gonna be. It's I'm the type of person that in 20 years will be like this. So okay, try to define it better than that. But hopefully you get my drift. This is about who you are right now. That your type of person that you are right now is somebody that will be on this success path. But try to define it so it's meaningful to you now, and that because this is identity, don't force this. Okay, don't make this a clothes that don't fit sort of thing. This should be something that you really feel deeply. That, you know, it might take some belief and commitment of the I am a successful person, you know, but that's not a square peg in a round hole necessarily. But so be careful with these sorts of things, but make sure that these feel true, and that they might take commitment, you know, a kind of commitment and a belief. But when you kind of feel that commitment, it should feel right. You know, otherwise you're not understanding what I'm trying to say. So you know, you are, you know, I am a driven person with clear goals. I am a resilient person. I am someone who can't be stopped. I am open to change. And these are identities, and these will help with mindsets. So mind your mindset. You know, think of a growth mindset and not a fixed mindset. And there's some other books associated with it that push this, and this is good stuff. You know, this is also related to locus of control and whether you're an agent in your own life. You know, you are the person that grows. You are growing in your knowledge. You are growing in your skill. Right now, you're at a point of your skill, but you're on a path. And before you didn't know as much, and now you're going to, in the future, you're going to know more, whatever that is, how to get a date, how to make another person happy, how to get good grades. Think of this as a continuum of growth, and that even when you reach failures, that's a thing that's there to actually teach you something. Think of change as a constant thing. You're constantly in a state of movement. You're constantly in a state of becoming, and you're constantly working towards growth. And even when you have setbacks, that's an opportunity, and that's just part of life. Over the long term, it's about growth. Know that small, even tiny progress is still progress. The vector, the direction matters. The baby step, the one little step, the movement towards a step, that's still movement, that's still action. If you're taking action, even small, you're taking action. See failures as teachers. Do not avoid what makes you feel weak. Do not avoid what makes you feel dumb. Not if they're part of a place you want to go. If they're part of the path. Don't avoid them. You get strong by pushing through weakness. Again, within reason. I talked before about this. This is like weightlifting, that you feel weak as you're pushing yourself. This isn't about ripping out your tendons, but you can feel like you can't. I don't know if I can get another rep in. And by pushing through that, by putting yourself in that condition where you're stretching yourself. In some cases, literally stretching, but where you are feeling the warning signs from your body that's saying, hey, this better be important because we need resources to do this, done in a proper manner, that's actually what triggers growth. That's what triggers the building up of strength, that triggers building up of endurance, that's what asks for adding myelin sheath to the axon so that you're better innervation, so you call more muscle fibers. Doesn't matter if that didn't make sense to you, but the point is that by putting yourself in that condition where you have to voluntarily push through, voluntarily approach that weakness, that's what actually makes you stronger. And so you get smart by pushing through dumbness. What did you just say? Don't avoid that. Don't avoid that didn't work, Oh, I don't get that. It's kind of like a failure. No, it's there to teach. Stop. Push through that. Revel in that sense of I don't get this until you do get it. Because that's actually neuroplasticity happening. That's actually your neurons getting better wired. All right, and then reflect on your progress and let who you are becoming, transform who you are right now. Okay, so hopefully this was interesting. Hopefully you had some value in it. Love to hear what you thought was valuable and what you thought was perhaps confusing. Keep in mind how important and impactful the extra credit is in the class, and also even if you already have a pretty good grade, submitting something for extra credit is very valuable for helping future students so that I can tune these lectures better. Okay, so what did we talk about? We talked about becoming more motivated. We talked about knowing yourself. We talked about negotiating with yourself. We talked about hacking yourself. And we talked about transforming yourself. So lecture 28, we're going to get into the book again. We're going to talk about chapter 10, which is the structures of organizations. And that will include formal and informal hierarchies, and formal and informal networks within organizations, and formal and informal processes. We'll talk about policy and structure within organizations. We'll talk about technology and structure, and we'll talk about teams and structure. And finally, we'll talk about individuals and structure. And this is the structure here is the structure of organizations. Okay, thanks for joining me today. Hope this was interesting. I look forward to hearing from you about it, and we will see you for the next lecture.